Next panel, it'll talk about emerging trends, personalized learning, gamification, augmented reality, virtual reality, robotics, and a lot else besides. The panelists for this session are Dr. M. Srinivasan, the founder, principal, and chairman at Gear Innovative International School. He'll be joined by Ananthakrishnan Ji, the chief technology officer at Pliablo. Further joined by Shubha Jain, the senior design ICT faculty at Neve Academy. Katherine Steen, who is the whole school tech coordinator at Stonehill International School. And finally, Dipika Rao, the head of school at Ebenezer International School. The moderator for this session is Mr. Amol Arora, who is the MD at Shamrock and Chelmsford Group of Schools.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amol Arora. I'm the managing. Actually, there are a lot of people who can't see me. Just stand up for this. My name is Amol Arora. I'm the managing director of Shamrock Preschools and Chelmsford K-12 schools. We have about 625 schools across the country. But today's topic, we've had some interesting discussions about what should be the future, and we had sir talked about the globalization. And what I'd like from this panel is, I've always wanted that the audience should take back something from the session that I moderate. So the idea is that, with your approval, I'd like to give them some tips which they can implement tomorrow in their classrooms, in their schools as well. Things about technology, we've had the reasons for why we should do it, how it will be, but exactly how do I do it in my schools? And I believe when we're on the panel, it's not about that we are somehow better than the audience over here. We're all part of the same community. It's more about if we can share our learnings about what has worked, and importantly, what has not worked when it comes to EdTech. Because how I look at EdTech is like the perennial bridesmaid. It's always a promise of this is going to change everything. We have so many interesting vendors out there, and we've been seeing it for, I think, nearly 2 decades now. But somehow schools don't change the way the world outside has changed. So why is that happening, and what kind of changes you brought about in your school, especially when it comes to incorporating tech in your schools? I think I would like to hear those instances, and if there are some tools and products that you're using, if you can share with the audience that, would that be a good idea? I think that whatever has been working for them, and maybe, otherwise, as educators, it's very overwhelming when we go to every expo, we see so many products, and of course, Hamza ma'am talked about the time factor. It's also about, as management, we know also about who pays for this technology, right? There's a pressure, we can't increase the fees. Parents are up in arms, and ultimately we like a product which seems good. So time is a constraint, the curriculum, the lessons have to be finished within the whole period, and ultimately who pays. So if you can share things which are working for your schools, I think that will be a real good takeaway from this conference, and people can go back and say, okay, this has worked, let's check this tool out. And right, is that something that would that be something that I think we can talk about, rather than, I can talk about the future of AR and VR, and that's okay, good to know, you can go on YouTube and watch those videos as well. But what is practically working in the Indian and especially Bangalore school scenario, I think that will be something which will be a better. So I'm sorry, I'm going to get back to my seat, just for this group of people who could not see me. So ma'am, I'd like to start from that end. Could you share what kind of tech you're using in your school, and what has worked, what do you think has, because how I look at tech is for 2 reasons. One is that actually increase the learning of children, and second is the marketing as well. As private schools, there's a marketing element, and some people use the word gimmicky for that as well. But sometimes you have to take choices based on the marketing value as well. So what has worked for you in your schools? If rest of you meanwhile can think about the same questions, I'm going to pass it on.
Right. Good afternoon. I'm Shubha. I'm a design teacher, and I am I have been always advocating technology, not as an integral part of the curricula, but only as a tool that can be used in the classroom. So as rightly said by Mr. Anmol, that we should share what worked. So being a design teacher myself, we've always been talking about, so the panel spoke about collaboration, the panel spoke about critical thinking, group work, critical thinking, lifelong learners, risk takers, being balanced, right? And what do we do in the classroom to make that happen, right? I'll just give you a very small example of a very small thing that I did with grade 6. Now this panel is about gamification as well, and we had a lot of, I am not a teacher who talks about debate, because for me the debate is only for and against. However, we talk in a class to take a stand. Take a stand on what you think, maybe right, maybe wrong. We are not here to judge you, not even to judge your perspectives, you have your own. So I'm running a unit called Gamification, and in that particular unit, we had a lot of debate over, not debate, rather we took a stand over, like, is game useful for education? Or should games be an integral part of the education system? So that's the bigger question that was running the unit.
This was technology-based games or the physical games?
This is a technology-based games, of course.
Okay.
So gamification is definitely talks about more
those
about
were
technology.
Those were linked to the curriculum in some way?
Yes, so I'm a technology teacher also. So I'm teaching Scratch. All right. So how do I use Scratch? There is a way that I could use just Scratch by just making them learn the tools in Scratch, but I think today...
Could you give a two-line introduction about Scratch, because some people may
All right,
not know.
Scratch is a software which is basically used to create animations and games, and this is kind of a coding tool, a block coding software. However, nowadays the kids are really far, like you say Scratch and 90% of the class will say, I know how to use it. So there is no point that I stand and teach them Scratch. We just take a quick session of 15 minutes and we just say this is how Scratch works. So how we run a unit, so we're just talking about gamification. So we gave a very open-ended question. I said, okay, why don't you formulate your own problem statement? So there were 22 kids in a class, and every 22 kid came up with different problem statement per se. One of the child said that I want to create a game for a grade 1 student on storytelling. I said, all right, that's a good idea, but why do you want to do so? Now comes, I'm sorry, it's Tenzin is how you pronounce, the last moderator, the panel of the last moderator. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. But you rightly said that we do inquiry, right? So they came up with a beautiful problem statement that, yes, I want to create a game. But now I ask the student, can you tell me the reason why you want to create a game, right? And they came up with the pros of the game, why storytelling, why through a digital media, why not through a digital media, they came up. And you will not imagine that every child, the 22 children in a class, came up with 22 different problem statements, right? With a simple unit of creating games. And at the end product, I wish I could have shown you the end products. I could have 22 games which grades 1 to grade 6 are still using in the school. Right? So what we did was, it's just connecting them to the real users, connecting them to technology, but then using the technology to solve the real life problems. Now, I would like to just open a question to you. As a teacher, what I always believe, the right questioning skill is the only emerging trend in technology. In education, not in technology, sorry. That's the only emerging trend. If you ask a question, 2 plus 2, what will be the answer? What is 2 plus 2 to the audience? What is 2 plus 2? 4. Why not 3?
The audience knows it's a trick question, right? So they're not
No, it's
answering
not a trick question. It's a very simple question. 2 plus 2. What the answer is? Come on, I should get louder answers for that. What is 2 plus 2? 4. And if you ask the same question, that what can lead to answer 4? How many different answers will you get from this room? As many as we can, or as many as we want to. That's what, according to me, works in the classroom. It's not about technology. It's about the right questions. It's about how you link the real world, how you get the real world to the classroom, what kind of problems you want to challenge your students to. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Katherine. So would you want to share some experiences of what has worked?
Sure. So that was all things that I totally agree with, and we're enacting in our school as well. And I am the whole school technology coordinator, so my job is to work with teachers, helping them to figure out what technology works best and to use that most efficiently. And it's really along the same lines that the things that in my experience, work the best are not specific tools necessarily, but are tools that allow students to take ownership, to take creative opportunities, and for teachers to gather more information about their students. So whether you're choosing iPads or tablets or different softwares, the things that I like the most are things that offer a lot of different opportunities for students to create. So some specific examples, if that's what we're looking for. At my school, we do use iPads, so we're iPads in our primary school. So all of our students from age 3 up through, we're in the PYP IB system, so P8. Our 5th grade are on iPads, and then our secondary students.
So could I just ask?
Yes.
So they bring their own iPads, or the school gives
the school provides. So the school provides iPads for our primary students, and then in our secondary, from grade 6 through 12, our students bring in their own devices. So we are lucky in that we have a lot of technology that our students and teachers have access to. We also are a Google school, so we use Google Apps for Education, which to me, not to necessarily advocate one particular type of technology, but is really valuable and has transformed.
Why did you
a
choose
lot
that
of
over
what
the
we're doing.
Microsoft Classroom? Did you do the pros and cons?
So they chose that before I came in, so I'm not exactly sure what the thought process is to develop it. But in the schools that I've worked at, I've used Google Apps for both.
Right.
And just the simplicity of it, and it's very user-friendly for our students and for our teachers. Google is constantly adding new features and being very responsive to teachers.
And
what
even the
they're
user
using in the
community is
classroom.
adding a lot of add-ons to the.
Exactly.
So I think that's something that you can
Yeah.
note down. Please do check out the Google Classroom. It's free of cost. It's very,
would.
very easy to implement, especially for education, and has even you're an
Yeah.
IB school, but even for CBSE and ICSE
Anything,
schools, I mean,
any schools.
it's a wonderful tool.
But whether you're looking at Microsoft, 365 or Google Apps, what I love the most about these types of tools is that they're collaborative and that they have as many different applications as you could think of. So while there are lots of great products, and some of them are here that are specific programs or particular math programs or apps, those have their benefit and they allow students to gain skills. But the kinds of things that leave it open for teachers and students to innovate in the classroom and make that process easier are the things that I think you get the most bang for your buck, really. You get the most value out of apps and technology that are flexible and kind of can respond to what teachers are using in the classroom. A couple other very specific ones I'll mention is Seesaw. Is anybody using Seesaw? It's like the magic unicorn of technology apps, I think, for teachers and students. Again, it's flexible, it's easy for students to use, but the real benefit is that it allows for collaboration and sharing whatever is happening in the classroom with a big platform, with parent audiences, and gives students authentic.
Can I just stop you there?
authentic
Seesaw is
experiences.
another great app that you should check out.
Very good.
Again, at a teacher level, if a teacher is creating accounts with students, it's free of cost. If you need data for a school level, of course, there's a paid version. But please do check out that. It's a great portfolio tool for children to map out what they've been doing. And I mean, in national curriculums, we call collaboration, we have a word for that. We call it cheating. So I'm not sure how much collaboration we can do with the tools, but yeah,
Right.
so please carry
Well, you can collaborate within the class projects, right? We all have group work, we have group projects, but even if you're not collaborating with students, so for example, anything that also allows teachers to get more information about their students, right? More information about what's happening, so you can personalize learning. That's one of the questions that we might look at is what is personalized learning? And really that comes down to, can a teacher know every student in their class, and can they get more specific information about each kid to help them grow wherever they are and meet them where they are? And so things like, even using just a shared Google Doc or a blog or something like Padlet, which is an online kind of almost a sticky note bulletin board where students can collaborate online, that lets me see what all students are thinking. I can give feedback. In Google Docs and in an asynchronous way. So vendors don't really like me very much because I'm always going to advocate free things and things that are useful for our students, which are not always the flashiest. But those are the kinds of things that work well for us.
And how do you deal with training issues? Because it's not just, and I've made those mistakes in my years where I've found something very cool. I thought it would be implemented, and why shouldn't everybody love it? And then there's a huge resistance and inertia from the whole system. So how do you deal with not just the skill training, but the resistance overall, because people like to be the way, the teacher likes to teach the way she has been teaching for the past years, right?
Absolutely.
So how do you deal with those situations?
Yep, so that for me is I always try to find a problem that teachers are having and start with that. So if you can start from a place where there's already an issue or a problem that teachers want to solve, and then we can talk about how a technology solution might support that, that's where we really want to start. And so I like to start very small with things that can be easily implemented at our school. As a technology support person, I work by going into classrooms with teachers and helping them start to use that in their classrooms. So I might do a training, after school, but really, just like our students, adults aren't ready to learn something until they need it and until they're ready to implement it. So I try to go into their classrooms to show them how it works and to be there to support in case something goes wrong and build momentum that way. So that's kind of what works for me.
If I can ask you, the image of tech that she's presented in a school seems a bit overwhelming, and is there a situation where parents are now asking you to back off from tech as well? Have you heard that? Is it are we crossing the line when it's the optimum tech, or are we still not there yet? We have a long way to go.
So,
how do you look at tech?
I think so far the parents are not asking for it.
They want more or they want less?
They haven't really commented on it because I feel that as a school, we are pretty tech enabled. We do similar things as them, quite similar. We have the PYP which runs completely with iPads, and then the senior students who are also working with iPads in the international curriculum. In the national curriculum side, we do give iPads to them about twice or thrice a week, and we do work with them on a sustained level. We also use things which are freely available like Edmodo and Padlets and something which is not very fancy but which is useful.
Could you share some tools? Can you name some tools that you're using?
So something that we are also using the Seesaw very, very effectively. I think for the last 2-3 months we've been going on with it. And then we have some other things which I have the names with me, but I would like to, if anybody wishes to know, we can give them the list of apps that we can use where you just use your iPad to click it and you are able to see a 3-dimensional picture. It's almost like a VR. Instead of wearing a VR headset, you are just using your iPad for creating a virtual reality situation. And you can study the insides of a body or a brain or whatever you are looking out for. So all I want to say is that there is a lot of stuff that's happening here. And I have been part of setting up 2 schools in the past where we've set up huge maker spaces and very elaborate. So those schools have spent...
Could you give a 2-line introduction about maker spaces, because some people may
Okay,
not.
so maker spaces, if I were to describe, it's a very, very daunting experience for anyone who's not from the technical background to first see a maker space. Incidentally, I'm an engineer, so I'm fine with it. But the first experience of maker spaces, there's a whole lot of tools which you have there, like laser cutters, you have smithy, you have molding, you have 3-dimensional things going on, then you have woodwork, and you have 3D printers, you have the works there. Now, schools spend a lot of money in setting it up, and I have seen very small versions of it also which come in the tune of about 10 to 12 lakhs, and then there are huge maker spaces which I have worked on which were to the tune of close to 1 crore. Now, when you set up spaces like that, a school sets up spaces like that, a couple of schools set it up as totally something which will get them a lot of mileage. And that becomes the hallmark of selling the school, so to speak.
That's a marketing and
That's a marketing
the
strategy.
Part of
but the second aspect is when you have set up a space like that, and when you have devoted such a huge amount of money, your infrastructure, into creating a space like that, the second most important thing for you is, actually it's the first most important as per me, but I'm not talking from the investor's point of view. For them, okay, fine. The first is the strength which is coming in the numbers, and most of us heads, we know our mandates are numbers. So the second thing for the head, the first thing is, how do I utilize this space? And as you rightly said, the daunting aspect. An ordinary teacher gets into that space and then starts wondering, like, what am I supposed to do with this whole thing? Where do I see an interface with my curriculum? Because I am bound by the curriculum.
So the managements normally who set up maker spaces somehow get the idea, go to a conference
because
abroad.
Because you go to conferences, you travel abroad and you come back.
Why we have this does not percolate down to the teacher. She suddenly is given this fancy and huge investment and expected to create miracles with this and create this physical product, and she has no idea why she's been doing that.
So
right?
I'll give you a very simple example. So one of the things that we did was that there was going to be play competition which was coming up, and an inter-house play competition, and we just said that somehow in the play you have to utilize something which is created, you have to create something which has been done in the maker's lab. Now this would require a lot of interface, and people forget that maker spaces are not science-based spaces. So you have a lot of interface from art, you have to bring in your mathematics, you have to bring in design, you have to actually create a collaborative space. A maker space is nothing but a collaborative space. And when the student gets there, they realize that the teacher is as lost as me. A single subject teacher is lost. So maker spaces would actually entail collaboration. So there's no way that you can have that. Plus it also means that teachers have to come forward with their own views of how do they interpret the maker space. How do we actually utilize that? Well, the first experiment was not so great. The second one was good. We started out with making up a prototype of a plane. And we started with something as simple as an origami. And then we finally, in 4 months' time, we reached there where some students were able to create planes which could fly a certain distance. So there's this whole talk of creativity, innovation, etc. And all I feel is innovation doesn't happen with everyone and every single day. Everybody doesn't innovate. There's a very small percentage of our population that innovates. So are we talking about these words in a very generalized manner when we say this? Critical thinking. Everybody doesn't think critically. There are some of us who are dreamers. Where would the literature be if there were no dreamers? Where would the poetry be? And I respect them more than the people who create very fancy gadgetry. Because these are the dreamers who make you dream. If you don't dream, you don't create.
You're an engineer as well. Right?
Yeah, but I am a very, very, I think, artistically inclined person. So I feel if you don't dream, then how do you create? How do you innovate? So all I would like to say is when you create a space, when you bring in something to a school, however small or big it is, please first put it to maximum possible use.
So, ma'am,
just bringing in a lot of stuff is not important.
Since I'm expecting a lot of school heads here, what would you recommend that if they like something, how should they get the teachers and all to be equally excited about the product?
So I would just tell you two things here. When I came to this school, they were using iPads. In senior grades, we have something called iTunes U courses running. And we had a lot of new stuff coming in this year. So the people who were good at it were made into somebody we called swimmers. And they were the ones who basically became like buddies. So we had a lot of interaction and peer teaching and peer learning which was going on, which worked out very, very well. And I also feel that there is a lot of...
You identified these people who, these teachers
yes.
who were quick to grasp it.
And very keen to do it
Keen to do it and then made like case studies like virtually out of them and asked them to send, okay.
And we also have a lot of assisted teaching. So we have a lot of interdisciplinary teaching which goes on in classrooms. So you could see a math class, but you could have a couple of teachers there, like 3 or 4 teachers in there doing one concept at the same time. Okay. So if I'm doing a TOK, let's say, then I may have another 2 or 3 people who come in and they're doing similar things, sure. which happens in most schools in TOK, but we do it even in our younger classes. And as far as this is concerned, I'll tell you an example. A couple of years back, I was in a school where using an Apple was essential. So I was very smart. For full 2 years that I was there, I kept the Apple laptop in front of me and my own Windows one in front of me. I was always working there.
Ma'am, you can install Windows on an Apple machine.
I know, but I didn't know then. Okay, so I had this resistance. I'm not going to move to this. And my head would come by and he would just look at me and he would say, "Oh, Dipika, don't pretend in front of me. I know you're working on this." And this is just a dummy there. For 2 years, it stayed a dummy. And then it was just something which was up there. And then I started thinking one day, that why so? And I vowed that I'm going to change. And when I moved into this assignment, it was again a compulsion here. I had my own laptop with me, but I said no more. And I moved very successfully within a week. So I always say, well, if at my stage, if I could just transition so effortlessly, and now I feel that I can't do without it, the newer things that I'm doing with it. So I just feel it's just a fear. So you have to overcome the fear.
That's how you nominate.
Yes, so it's my own example. People can learn from this.
So Anand, you come from a tech company who's looking at schools from the outside. And I'm sure, I know the plight of friends as EdTech vendors now, they meet me at conferences. How you feel you're hitting your head against a brick wall when it comes to implementing something which you know is a good tool. But why do you think schools are so resistant to change? And I'm sure you feel that and you think about that a lot. So I want to ask you this question. How do you feel and why do you think schools are like that?
I want to start by saying that my experience with schools has been the 16 years that I've spent, not more than that. So this is a very elite panel. It's very true, Amol, that we do face a lot of resistance. I wouldn't call it resistance, but perhaps difference of opinions in way, right? There's a perspective of running a school from the inside, and there's a perspective of running or enabling running a school from the outside. A lot of talk has been happening about gamification, and we at Playable also believe strongly how efficacious it is. Gamification has existed for a very long time, right? When I grew up, my dad used to say, you solve these problems within 5 minutes, I'll give you a 5-star, right? In a sense, that's gamification.
That bribing.
You call it bribing. It worked with me, so it can work with a lot of children.
It can work virtually as well.
Absolutely. So technology, I believe strongly, is an enabler that way. So what worked in those days you could probably not distribute 5 stars to all the children in your class because
but the human motivation factors remain
absolutely
the same, right?
So the intrinsic motivation. I would strongly recommend a book called Reality is Broken by Dr. Jain. Please read it. It changed my entire conceptualization of what is gamification and why it is so strong. And it works across the age spectrum, right? It works with the child.
So this is our first non-free resource that we've given you. Everything else was free before that.
I think knowledge should come. That's the reason why so many heads are together here. I think we're here to share our experiences.
Just cracking the joke.
In terms of what she explains, Dr. Jain McGonigal, by the way, is she's called the father of gamification. She's done about 30 years of research, all in gamification.
She's called the father of gamification?
Yes, right?
Are we going to go down that route now, or are we going to stick to our topic?
I think what's important here is she did a lot of research in terms of why games are so successful. Do we ever have to encourage our children to go and play? The answer is a significant no. Right? But when we have to bring them along and make them do the assignments and the homework and study, it's an uphill task. We all know it's a slippery slope to climb unless they are intrinsically motivated. Games have that very specific facet. We all have always worried. I have 2 school-going children myself. I worry about their screen time as well. So how do I wear different hats when I come to a school and sell the technology that I am aware that I have to keep my children, I wouldn't say away from, but optimally use, right? I think that's where the answer lies. Gamification is an extremely heavily researched field in these days. There are a lot of Finnish schools that we hear about who have adopted a curriculum just on gamification. They don't have exams, they don't have homeworks. Everything that the children do, as I think you were mentioning, ma'am, in the class, if they have to solve a problem, they try and gamify the whole experience. And this school has been there for the last 6 years. Please look them up. There's a school in New York and Chicago also who are trying to adopt a similar fashion where they don't want to follow the pedagogy of what renowned educationalists know works. And here is why.
I'm sure gamification is a much more intrinsic motivator
Absolutely.
than पढ़ लेने तो फिर तो जूता मारूंगा मैं मार ये करूंगा
it's one way.
kind of
We have always believed in this carrot and stick, and here is
gamification is a carrot and the juta is a stick, right?
Probably, right? But what's important to note is, I think, as one of the sessions, one of the ma'ams really mentioned, right? You work with your minds, but let your hearts govern it. I think that's very important. What works with games is the children love it at heart as opposed to the mind, which is why it is very, very intrinsic. It's almost philosophical there, right?
Yeah.
But children, it works very well. And even as an adult, I mean, just if we try and take away a half-solved puzzle from a child, please try risking it. You will end up with a few scratches.
They'll find out how fast they can run, right?
Right? And we think that it is pushing them in one direction because that's our knowledge. Probably that's our limited knowledge, right? How many of us actually dare, and this is a question for me too, actually dare to give the opportunity for the child to say, do you think this is right for you? And mind you, we were introduced to technology. our generation. The new generation is born with it. There are so many things that you and I may not have thought through what's going on in a child's mind. So it's a learning for all of us. Child is always a father of man. I strongly believe.
Sure, everyone would have stories of what children
Absolutely.
have done. Their
I get
not only their
amazed.
school, their families, their nieces and nephews. At what age they were sending text messages, and today they are the text solvers for most grandparents. Like, मेरा ये WhatsApp में
Right.
चल रहा जरा ठीक कर दे.
Please,
4-year-old is
and
gonna
the 4-year child goes and
4-year-old
helps.
goes and cleans up the memory and says,
I'd
"Dad, this is-"
like to end by saying one example. I was interacting with a 4th grader, and mind you, 4th grader. We were just talking about dimensions to a 4th grader. I learned 3 dimensions. There could be more than 3 dimensions when I was in grade 10, perhaps. And this child confidently walks up to me and said, "Uncle, I can explain to you what are the 3 dimensions." I said, "Very nice." He neatly drew the diagram, very beautifully done. A 4th grader. And he says, "Do you know what the next dimension is?" I said, "This I did not expect."
Yeah, that was not in our syllabus, right?
Right.
We just
Definitely
had,
not.
Yeah, we just had.
Right? He said, I can prove that time is the 4th dimension." He said, "That's beautiful." Explain to me, how did you understand this? He said, "Very simple. I have a game, right, where we'll have to figure out certain characters in some 3-dimensional space. So that game says latitude 25 degrees north, 42 degrees, right, longitude. And then that's a 3-dimension. Where is timing coming in?" He said, "Have you noticed there is a seconds in that?"
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
You reach that latitude, longitude, and you travel 4 seconds into that.
Right.
That is the space.
That's a
point
dimension.
in space.
He
He says that's a dimension. That's how I understood. Can you believe that a game has taught a child that there is a 4th dimension which most curriculums don't cover? So that was a flabbergasting moment for me. A 4th grader explaining to me what time could be as a 4th dimension. So that's the impact of how proficient a game could actually teach a simple concept.
So, Dr. Srinivasan, we've got I think Anantha's already set up the question for you. We have a generation of students in your school who are actually almost a different species now, right, from us.
True.
I mean, and we are supposed to teach them. I mean, it's almost like, shouldn't they be teaching us? And that's what they're actually doing in the classroom now. So how do you, as a school management, decide on tech and considering? I mean, ma'am had a point there. It's always about the numbers for the management at the end of the day. She mentioned that with a bit of a tone, which you're right. So, ma'am, speaking on from the management side, we can't help it. I mean, the bank loans have to be paid, the salaries have to be paid. We're sorry about that, but to put pressure. But how do you decide about these decisions? And I think because you have to look at so many stakeholders, whether it will ultimately get implemented in the classroom as well, what are the marketing, the ROI, who's going to pay for it, and will it work ultimately in the schools? How do you take decisions on
All
this?
these things can be taken care if a school is doing well. Doing well means what? Your children should learn well. Now, we want every child to be outstanding. Is it possible? It is possible if you use technology to synthesize the researches available in this world on brain and learning, all kinds of things. If you can do that, every child can be a genius. The last page of our prospectus says we are looking at developing Wimbledon and Nobel minds. We are not just trying to get children who get 100 out of 100 mathematics. For that, lot of innovations, lot of creative work has to be done. The focus point would be design thinking. If you want everybody to be involved in design thinking, everybody to climb their own mountains, everybody to grow the tallest possible, technology is the solution. But as far as I am concerned, till today, I have not come across one product which satisfies me. If I have selected a few products, that's only a compromise. And I have selected products only for researching, not for teaching. Children use all kinds of technologies. There is nothing that in our school we don't use. But we have not gone to one particular solution. For example,
Are you expecting one solution, or do you think little paths, as she was talking about, satisfy different.
Multiple solutions
so
can be
why is
adopted.
it? You make it sound like a bad thing, right?
It's not a bad thing.
So-
This is the only solution. But unfortunately, we are in the nascent stage where we don't have the correct solution for children. They are more creative than the products that we get. Okay? Now, we have an iPad lab to teach creative mathematics for grade 2, 3, and 4 for the last 7 years. They are doing fantastic job. That program was developed by us. When somebody came with the program, it was not satisfying. We base our work on hardcore research in the field of brain development, intelligences, emergent curriculum, and whatever you talk about. We do so many things which Finland doesn't do, Australia doesn't do. So in that case, technology can enable you to do what you want. If you want a ready-made solution, maybe there will be limitations. See, if you want every child to be motivated, that means every child should be happy. If a child has to be happy, they have to do challenging work. That you can do only by identifying their intelligence type and assigning work in that area.
Are you recommending that schools start creating technology for themselves? Because that's
School
something
should be
which is-
involved in creating technology.
Okay. I think that's,
If you can
yeah.
take the stakeholders in the form of teachers and develop specific custom designed solution to the school, I think that's where we'll do
I
well.
think that's what Katherine was referring to when she said she looks for those pain points, goes around looking for them, rather than choosing a technology. It's like having a hammer in your hand and looking for nails to hit, right? And everything starts looking like a nail then after that. So I think,
One thing more, if we can involve children in finding solutions, you have genius products, because it is they who are going to use, they know how to do things, and they will help you.
I think that's a great tip for all the vendors and you as well. Not only, the reason Uber was successful is they had taxi drivers in their management team who are driving what motivates a driver, how would that, because, and what we see in the edtech industry and the big reason for failure that I see is that they don't have any teacher. Just because they have been through a school as a student, they think they understand our pain points and they don't, and then keep getting frustrated from outside. So I think you've taken it one notch higher, that you said involve the kids as well in the product design as well.
Every designer is looking at learning from one angle. It has to be a comprehensive angle of learning. For that, you should all learn first multiple intelligences to understand how a child learns. Then take the help of the children to design. I think that will be a failure-proof product.
Great. With this, I think we're running out of time, and of course, lunch is looming around the corner, and I'm getting messages from them to wind up. Can we take a question? Yes, we can. We'd like to have any questions. Happy to have any questions. And please do mention, make it a question. Please don't, so we can maybe have one or two of them. Just give a brief introduction of yourself if you're asking a question, that so we know what context you're referring to and who is the question directed towards. Would love to. No
Anyone?
questions? No, lunch is not ready yet, so anyways, we can. It's not as if your questions are going to delay lunch, so you can ask.
Dr. Mohammed Saeed here from National Institute for Peace and Value Education. My question to the panelists is, at a time when 25 children are committing suicide in India, every day, one child hour, we are becoming a deficient society. We talk about Finland, England, Ireland, and hardly heard anything talking about our motherland. The new mantra in Western countries is now about a school of happiness, a school of kindness, a school of compassion. I want to see a stall here where we can have a kind of ideas how to generate the children, where they are happy, content, and joyful. What is your take about this?
In fact, I think a lot of panelists, we were talking about getting children interested, involved in the learning process. You talked about what pain points they have, addressing. I think we're all talking about collaboration, communication, the Seesaw app. It's all, I think technology, and Anant is talking about gamification. I think we're all talking about the tools that lead to happiness. I mean, of course, with our student-teacher ratios, you cannot expect a one-to-one relationship because the economics also have to work out. You can't have a one-to-one relationship as well. So technology in some ways bridges that gap between the home, the child, and the school. And I think that's where a lot of emotional development can happen. Otherwise, in the traditional report card system, the child just moves from class to class with total disconnect of what he's learned in the previous school. And I think,
See, your question is very valid. If we can step aside as teachers and become mentors and facilitators, children will feel happy. And from there, their value system will be different.
I would also like to make one point here. If you look at innovation and if you read up on that, and I have been reading up a lot on that, one of the key reasons why we innovate is when we feel compassion and empathy. There can be no innovation just from nowhere. So all I can say is that if as schools and as individuals we really want students to be creative and get into design thinking and innovate, then the first thing that we need to develop in them is the humane values. Because till you observe your surroundings and you really spend time observing your surroundings, you cannot identify where are the issues that need to be addressed, where are the questions. And only when you have identified the questions can you start looking for solutions which could lead to meaningful innovations. And innovation which is not effective or meaningful or not relevant to any segment of the society is not really an innovation. It will end up as a gimmick. So in some way, I do think, but of course we know that we all struggle with the reality of, like his book, The Broken Reality. We do all deal with the broken reality of the curricular expectations, the examinations, the parental pressures and so on, which will remain a forever struggle. But schools which can, in small doses, also begin to do this and educate your parents on the side, on the need for doing this, I think they will be the ones who will really bring about the change in society.
I think even the previous panels also discussed about the questioning, critical ability, getting children more engaged in education, getting, and as ma'am you said, getting ourselves engaged in the process of improvement. And I think the fact that we have an amazing audience here, I mean, such a large gathering who's just come to learn, is a testament to the fact that we all want to improve, we all want to give back to our children, we want to, every day we want to see our schools becoming better and better. So it is a positive step in that sense. And I think we all as educators have to keep thinking on those lines, and that's true. It is children facing stress of examinations and why they have to commit suicide just because the grades were not good enough. And Sir talked about every child can be a genius, and if we start identifying that you may not be a genius on these parameters, but you can be a genius on some other parameters as well. And as we as schools start identifying that, we as schools start educating the parents about these things, I think we'll all have made our contribution. I think we all have to make our contribution. It's not going to be one person's job. Narendra Modi is not going to do it. We all have to do it in our schools, and that's how the change will happen when it percolates to the rest of the country.
I would like to add one point.
Ma'am, mic please. Mic please.
Hello. I would like to add one point to the factor of happiness, right? So in a classroom, when you give ownership to children to create, I think there is a happiness all around. I am a design teacher, so I always I teach design thinking to my students. As rightly said, empathy. So we do evaluate the product based on the emotional connect. When the product is actually created by a child, we see the immense happiness of failures, of success, and we do celebrate all failures and success together. I think that's the beauty of makerspaces, that's the beauty of gamification, and use of technology in a right way. I think that would bring happiness once the ownership is given to our own students.
But until and where he's coming from is until our assessments are purely driven by that class 12th exam, these things will remain at the periphery. I don't see a core change, and maybe artificial intelligence may somehow solve that for us. But till then, it is going to be stressful for children.
I think as a teacher, I have also evolved myself. I have been teaching in this particular industry for 12 years, and I have evolved myself as a teacher. And now I think that assessment is a gimmick that we as teachers have created for ourselves. We have to create lifelong learners.
We can't say that to parents. I mean, we need it.
We can. Actually, we can. And I think the kind of environment, the kind of learning the child has, if you showcase that to parents, I think that I'm talking about a big change. I think it will take time.
In the CBSE curriculum, we still hear that please do all these things till class 8. Uske baad ab serious ho jao. You know, we still are.
Because I tell my all.
And the advertisements on May 25th with the photographs of all the children with the CGPAs
I know that's
is testimony to
crazy.
what we are.
Of course.
Until so that
totally
question comes, I think, sir, we still have a problem on, and that's a valid point you've raised. I mean,
Because when my daughter do Google, she's in CBSE school and she learns facts, and I said, why are you doing so? And we have a lot of argument. As a parent, I'm talking. We have an argument at home that Google can tell you facts, but not the concept. So focus on the concept. So as a teacher, focus on the concept too.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So, a good panel, good session. I hope you were able to take things back for your school and will implement some of the learnings that we've shared with you. Thanks, EdTech Review, for inviting us, having us here. It's been